What happens when military genius collides with desperate necessity? How does a commander achieve the impossible when the stakes are survival itself? In the frozen forests of Belgium during Christmas 1944, one of World War II's most dramatic military operations unfolded, an operation that would test the limits of American military capability, challenge the relationship between commanders who barely tolerated each other, and demonstrate that audacity combined with skill could accomplish what seemed impossible. On December 16, 1944, Hitler launched his last great gamble in the West, a massive offensive through the Ardennes forest designed to split the Allied armies, capture the vital port of Antwerp, and force a negotiated peace. The German assault achieved complete surprise, smashing through thinly held American lines and threatening to unhinge the entire Allied position in northwest Europe. At the center of this maelstrom stood the small Belgian town of Bastogne, a critical road junction whose possession would determine whether the German offensive succeeded or failed. The 101st Airborne Division, rushed to Bastogne as German forces converged on the town, found itself surrounded and cut off. For the besieged paratroopers, relief seemed distant. The closest American forces were miles away. Winter weather had grounded air support, and the Germans controlled all approaches to the town. Yet, within 72 hours of receiving orders to relieve Bastogne, Lieutenant General George S. Patton's Third Army had disengaged from its offensive in the Saar, wheeled 90 degrees north, and smashed through German lines to break the siege. This achievement stunned military professionals then and since. The operation required moving over 100,000 men and 25,000 vehicles across icy roads in the middle of winter, coordinating 3 divisions to attack simultaneously across a broad front and breaking through prepared German defenses, all executed with a speed and precision that seemed to defy military possibility. When Eisenhower, Supreme Commander of Allied forces, first heard Patton claim he could reach Bastogne within days, he reportedly laughed, thinking it was another example of Patton's notorious bravado. When Patton actually accomplished it, that laughter turned to shocked admiration, mixed with his characteristic unease about the mercurial general, whose brilliance was matched only by his capacity for controversy. This is the story of Bastogne's relief, not just a tale of military operations, but a human drama involving desperate soldiers fighting for survival, a controversial general proving his genius, and a supreme commander learning that sometimes the impossible simply requires the right man at the right moment. It is a story of courage under impossible circumstances, of command decisions made in crisis, and of an operation that would become legendary in military history. The Battle of the Bulge began in the pre-dawn darkness of December 16, 1944, when German artillery erupted along an 80-mile front in the Ardennes. 3 German armies, the 6th SS Panzer Army in the north, 5th Panzer Army in the center, and 7th Army in the south, smashed into positions held by 4 American divisions, most of them either inexperienced or exhausted from previous fighting. The attack achieved complete tactical surprise. American intelligence had dismissed warnings about German buildup, convinced that Germany lacked the resources for a major offensive. The strategic situation that led to this German attack reflected Hitler's desperate circumstances by late 1944. In the east, the Red Army was approaching Germany's borders after destroying Army Group Center in the summer. In the west, Allied forces had liberated France and were approaching the German frontier. Germany was being crushed between 2 massive forces, and Hitler knew that time favored the Allies. His solution was characteristic: a bold offensive that would shatter Allied unity, recapture Antwerp, and force Britain and America to negotiate peace, allowing Germany to concentrate on fighting the Soviets. The plan was fantasy from its conception. Germany lacked the fuel, ammunition, and trained soldiers necessary for sustained offensive operations. The Luftwaffe could not provide adequate air support. The dependence on capturing Allied fuel dumps to sustain the advance revealed the plan's desperation. Yet Hitler insisted, overriding military objections, gambling everything on surprise and initial momentum to achieve objectives before Allied reserves could respond. The offensive represented Hitler's last roll of the dice, a bid to escape the strategic vice closing on Germany. The American forces holding the Ardennes sector were there precisely because the sector was considered quiet. The rugged, forested terrain was deemed unsuitable for major operations, ironically the same reason the Germans had chosen it for their 1940 offensive that conquered France. The 106th Infantry Division, newly arrived in Europe, held positions in the north. The 28th Infantry Division, rebuilding after suffering heavy casualties in the Hurtgen Forest, held the center. The veteran 4th Infantry Division held the south. These divisions were stretched thin across a front that doctrine suggested required 3 times as many troops to defend properly. When the German assault began, American units fought with desperate courage, but were overwhelmed by numbers and firepower. The 106th Division's 2 regiments on the Schnee-Eifel found themselves surrounded within days. The 28th Division fell back fighting, delaying the German advance but unable to prevent penetration. German armored spearheads drove westward, racing for objectives beyond the Meuse River. By December 17th, German forces had created a bulge, soon to give the battle its name, extending deep into American lines. The American command structure's response to the crisis revealed both the strengths and weaknesses of Allied leadership. General Omar Bradley, commanding 12th Army Group, initially dismissed the attack as a local counterattack and was slow to recognize its scale. General Courtney Hodges, commanding 1st Army, which bore the brunt of the assault, seemed paralyzed by the crisis. Supreme Commander Eisenhower, however, immediately grasped the attack's significance and began rushing reinforcements to the threatened sector. Eisenhower's response demonstrated his strategic acumen. He ordered the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, refitting after Operation Market Garden, to move immediately to the Ardennes. He transferred divisions from other sectors despite their commanders' protests. Most significantly, he recognized that the crisis required exceptional measures and exceptional commanders. On December 19th, he convened an emergency conference at Verdun to coordinate the Allied response. The Verdun Conference brought together the key commanders who would shape the battle's outcome. Eisenhower opened by declaring that the situation should be viewed as an opportunity, not a disaster. The Germans had come out from behind their fortifications and could be destroyed in the open. This framing set the tone for what followed. He needed aggressive action to blunt the German offensive and then counterattack to destroy the German forces that had penetrated Allied lines. Lieutenant General George S. Patton, commanding 3rd Army, attended the conference with characteristic confidence. Where other commanders saw problems and obstacles, Patton saw opportunity. His 3rd Army was engaged in offensive operations in the Saar region, but he had already, on his own initiative, begun planning for a shift north to attack the German flank. When Eisenhower asked when Patton could attack, the answer stunned the room. Patton declared he could attack with 3 divisions on December 22nd, just 3 days away. The other commanders were skeptical. Moving an entire Army Corps 90 degrees across icy roads in winter while maintaining combat effectiveness seemed impossible. Even Eisenhower reportedly smiled, thinking Patton was engaging in his typical bombast. But Patton was serious, and he had already laid the groundwork. His staff had prepared contingency plans. His units were alerted. The logistics were being organized even as he spoke at Verdun. This moment, Patton's confident assertion that he could achieve what others deemed impossible, and Eisenhower's mixture of skepticism and hope, set in motion one of the war's most remarkable military operations. The relationship between these two men was complex. Eisenhower valued Patton's aggressive spirit and operational brilliance, but was constantly frustrated by his indiscipline and controversial statements. Patton respected Eisenhower's position, but chafed under what he saw as overly cautious leadership. The Bastogne operation would vindicate Patton's aggressive approach while simultaneously reinforcing Eisenhower's concerns about managing such a volatile subordinate. The target of Patton's relief operation was Bastogne, a small Belgian town of 4,000 inhabitants that happened to sit at the junction of 7 major roads. In the relatively roadless terrain of the Ardennes, these roads were essential for moving troops and supplies. Whichever side controlled Bastogne controlled mobility in the region. The Germans needed it to sustain their offensive westward. The Americans needed it to anchor their defense and enable counterattacks. The battle for the Ardennes would be decided in large measure by who controlled this unremarkable provincial town. The 101st Airborne Division, commanded by Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, in the absence of the division's regular commander, reached Bastogne on December 19th, just ahead of the German encirclement. The paratroopers established a defensive perimeter and prepared for siege. They were joined by elements of other units that had retreated to the town, including armored and artillery units that had escaped German encirclement. This composite force, numbering approximately 18,000 men, faced German forces that eventually numbered over 45,000 troops supported by armor and artillery. The situation for the defenders was desperate from the beginning. Supplies were limited. Medical facilities were inadequate for the casualties that would inevitably result from heavy fighting. Winter weather added misery. Temperatures dropped below freezing. Snow fell intermittently, and soldiers lacked adequate cold weather gear. Most critically, the defenders knew they were surrounded, and that relief, if it came at all, would take days. The question was whether they could hold that long against determined German attacks. The political dimension of the crisis added pressure on Eisenhower. The German offensive threatened to embarrass the Allied command and undermine public confidence in the war effort. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery was already criticizing American dispositions and suggesting that British forces should take over command of American units north of the Bulge. This proposal infuriated Bradley and other American commanders, but reflected genuine concern about the crisis. Eisenhower had to manage these political tensions while coordinating military responses. The weather during the opening days of the offensive favored the Germans. Heavy overcast prevented Allied aircraft from attacking German columns or providing close air support to American ground forces. This negated one of the Allies' significant advantages and allowed German forces to move and concentrate without fear of air attack. American soldiers, accustomed to operating with air superiority, found themselves fighting without the support they had come to depend on. The psychological impact of this was significant, adding to the sense of crisis. George S. Patton Jr. was perhaps the most controversial American general of World War II. Born in 1885 into a wealthy Virginia family with military traditions, Patton had graduated from West Point in 1909 and spent his early career in cavalry. He had competed in the 1912 Olympics in the modern pentathlon. He had pursued Pancho Villa in Mexico as a young officer. He had commanded tanks in World War I, being wounded in action and earning decorations for valor. By 1944, he had become one of the war's most successful operational commanders, leading forces in North Africa, Sicily, and France, with aggressive tactics that achieved spectacular results. Yet Patton's career had been marked by controversy that repeatedly threatened his command. In Sicily, he had slapped 2 soldiers suffering from combat fatigue, incidents that became public scandals and nearly ended his career. Eisenhower had been forced to relieve him of command temporarily and issue a public reprimand. Only Patton's demonstrated battlefield effectiveness and the recognition that he was irreplaceable as an operational commander saved him. The slapping incidents revealed Patton's character. He was brilliant and courageous, but also temperamental, insensitive, and prone to actions that embarrassed his superiors. Patton's command style reflected his personality and his understanding of warfare. He believed in aggressive offensive action, rapid movement, and constant pressure on the enemy. He drove his subordinates mercilessly, but led from the front, sharing dangers with his men. He understood logistics and the importance of keeping forces supplied and mobile. He had an intuitive grasp of battlefield dynamics that allowed him to exploit opportunities others missed. His soldiers respected his competence, even when they resented his harsh discipline. The relationship between Patton and Eisenhower was complicated by their different personalities and command philosophies. Eisenhower was a staff officer who had risen through organizational ability and diplomatic skill. He understood coalition warfare and the political dimensions of command. He preferred methodical operations with secure supply lines and coordination between Allied forces. Patton was a warrior who had risen through demonstrated combat leadership. He understood operational warfare and the importance of maintaining momentum. He preferred bold strokes that accepted risk in pursuit of decisive results. These different approaches created tension. Eisenhower saw Patton as brilliant but unreliable, capable of winning battles but also capable of creating scandals that threatened Allied unity. Patton saw Eisenhower as overly cautious, too concerned with politics, and insufficiently focused on destroying the enemy. Despite this tension, they worked together effectively because each recognized what the other brought to the partnership. Eisenhower provided strategic direction and managed the political complexities of coalition warfare. Patton provided operational brilliance and the aggressive spirit necessary to exploit opportunities. The Third Army that Patton commanded in December 1944 reflected his leadership and priorities. It was an aggressive, mobile force trained for rapid offensive operations. Its staff was experienced and capable of planning complex operations quickly. Its logistics organization was efficient at maintaining supply lines even during rapid advances. Its subordinate commanders understood Patton's expectations and his operational methods. The Third Army was, in many ways, an extension of Patton's personality, aggressive, confident, and focused on offense. The staff work that preceded Patton's proposal at Verdun revealed the Third Army's capability and Patton's foresight. Even before the Verdun conference, Patton had ordered his staff to prepare contingency plans for a shift north to attack the German flank. Colonel Halley Maddox, the Third Army G3 operations officer, worked with division commanders to develop 3 potential plans for attacks of varying scope and timing. This preparation allowed Patton to make his confident promise at Verdun. The planning was already done, the orders were being drafted, and the units were being alerted. The 3 divisions selected for the initial assault each brought different capabilities to the operation. The 4th Armored Division, commanded by Major General Hugh Gaffey, was one of the war's premier armored formations. It had distinguished itself in the breakout from Normandy and the drive across France. Its combination of tanks, armored infantry, and mobile artillery made it ideal for the rapid advance necessary to reach Bastogne. The 26th Infantry Division, commanded by Major General Willard Paul, was a solid National Guard division with combat experience. The 80th Infantry Division, commanded by Major General Horace McBride, was another experienced formation capable of sustained offensive operations. These divisions faced significant challenges in executing Patton's plan. They had to disengage from ongoing operations in the Saar, move north through congested roads in winter weather, reorient for attack in a new direction against a different enemy, and then assault prepared German defensive positions. The logistics alone were daunting. Moving over 100,000 men and 25,000 vehicles required detailed planning and execution. Fuel, ammunition, and supplies had to be repositioned. Artillery had to be moved and emplaced. Communications had to be established. All of this had to happen while maintaining operational security to prevent the Germans from discovering American intentions. The movement phase of the operation tested the Third Army's organizational capability. Units moved primarily at night to minimize German observation. Military police controlled traffic at critical intersections. Engineers cleared snow and spread cinders on icy roads. Fuel trucks positioned themselves along routes to refuel vehicles without stopping convoys. Supply dumps were established near the attack positions. The coordination required was extraordinary, yet it was executed with a proficiency that reflected the Third Army's experience and training. Colonel Halley Maddox, Third Army's operations officer, worked with minimal sleep during the days preceding the attack. He coordinated with each division's staff, ensuring they understood the plan and the timeline. He arranged for artillery support, coordinating with Corps and Army artillery to mass fires in support of the attack. He worked with the supply staff to position fuel and ammunition where it would be needed. He established communication networks to allow rapid coordination during the operation. Maddox's work exemplified the staff competence that made Patton's aggressive operations possible. The German forces that Third Army would attack were not the exhausted defenders that might have been expected. The 5th Panzer Army's southern flank was held by capable units that had been tasked with protecting the main German advance to the north. These forces included elements of the 5th Parachute Division and several Volksgrenadier divisions. They had established defensive positions and were prepared to resist American attacks. The Germans understood that their offensive southern flank was vulnerable to American counterattack and had taken measures to defend it. The weather during the period of Third Army's movement and attack was miserable. Temperatures remained below freezing. Snow fell intermittently, sometimes heavily enough to reduce visibility and make roads treacherous. The overcast skies that grounded Allied air power also made German defensive positions more difficult to locate and target. Soldiers moved and fought in conditions that tested endurance and reduced combat effectiveness. Vehicles broke down from the cold, weapons malfunctioned, frostbite and exposure threatened soldiers as much as German fire. Private First Class Eugene Luciano, an infantryman in the 26th Division, remembered the cold as the worst enemy during the march north and the subsequent attack. His unit moved in open trucks through freezing weather. Soldiers huddled together for warmth, but the wind cut through their uniforms. When they dismounted to attack, their fingers were so numb they could barely operate their weapons. Luciano saw men fall not from enemy fire, but from exhaustion and cold. The misery was constant, making every action more difficult and testing the soldiers' will to continue. The training that American divisions had received proved essential to their ability to execute complex operations under difficult conditions. The soldiers knew their jobs. Sergeants and junior officers understood small unit tactics. Company and battalion commanders could coordinate their unit's actions. Staff officers at division and corps level could plan and execute complex movements and attacks. This competence, developed through training and refined through combat experience, enabled the Third Army to accomplish what seemed impossible. Patton's personal leadership style during the preparation phase revealed his strengths. He visited units personally, talking to soldiers and commanders. He projected confidence that the operation would succeed. He communicated his expectations clearly: attack aggressively, maintain momentum, reach Bastogne. His presence energized subordinates and communicated urgency. Patton understood that leadership was not just about plans and orders, but about inspiring soldiers to accomplish difficult missions. His ability to motivate through personal example and force of personality was one of his greatest assets. The decision to attack with 3 divisions, rather than waiting to assemble a larger force, reflected Patton's operational philosophy. He believed that speed was essential. Every day of delay meant another day of suffering for the Bastogne garrison and another opportunity for German forces to strengthen their positions. 3 divisions attacking quickly could accomplish more than 5 divisions attacking a week later. This judgment proved correct, but it reflected calculated risk. If the attack had failed, the decision to prioritize speed over strength would have been criticized. The attack began on December 22, 1944, exactly when Patton had promised. 3 divisions of the 3rd Corps, commanded by Major General John Milliken, attacked northward on a 20-mile front. The initial objectives were to break through German defensive positions and advance toward Bastogne, 25 miles distant. The terrain favored the defenders: rolling hills, patches of forest, and small villages that could be fortified. The weather remained terrible, limiting air support and making movement difficult. The 4th Armored Division attacked on the Corps' right flank, aiming directly at Bastogne. Combat Command A and Combat Command B advanced on parallel axes, supported by Combat Command Reserve. The division's progress was measured in yards rather than miles, as it encountered German resistance at nearly every village and road junction. German anti-tank guns, firing from prepared positions, knocked out American tanks. German infantry, fighting from fortified buildings and foxholes, contested every advance. The promised rapid relief operation quickly became a grinding battle of attrition. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commanding the 37th Tank Battalion of the 4th Armored Division, led one of the spearheads driving toward Bastogne. Abrams was an aggressive, skilled tank commander whose leadership style emphasized leading from the front. His battalion fought through German positions day after day, losing tanks and men, but maintaining momentum. Abrams understood that speed was essential. Every day of delay meant another day of suffering for the surrounded defenders and another opportunity for German forces to strengthen their positions. The fighting that characterized Third Army's advance toward Bastogne was brutal and costly. Villages had to be cleared house by house. German defensive positions had to be located and destroyed. Casualties mounted steadily. The 4th Armored Division, which had begun the attack with approximately 200 medium tanks, lost dozens in the first few days of fighting. Infantry companies that began the attack at full strength were reduced to half strength within 48 hours. The operation's cost was higher than anticipated, but Patton insisted on maintaining pressure regardless of casualties. Captain James Leach, commanding a tank company in the 4th Armored Division, kept a diary during the advance to Bastogne. His entries recorded the grinding nature of the combat. December 22nd. Attacked at dawn, knocked out 3 German tanks but lost 2 of ours, took a village after 6 hours of fighting, exhausted. December 23rd. Another village, more casualties, German resistance stiffening. We're bleeding but still moving forward. December 24th. Christmas Eve in hell. Lost my best platoon leader today. How much longer can we sustain these losses? Leach's diary captured the strain that prolonged combat imposed on units and leaders. The 26th and 80th Infantry Divisions attacked to the left of the 4th Armored, tasked with protecting its flank and broadening the penetration. Their progress was similarly slow and costly. German Volksgrenadier divisions, while not as well equipped as regular army units, fought with determination. The defenders used the terrain effectively, establishing positions that forced American infantry to advance across open ground under fire. American casualties from both divisions climbed into the thousands, but the pressure on German defenses prevented reinforcements from being moved to block the 4th Armored Division's advance. Inside Bastogne, the 101st Airborne and attached forces fought a different kind of battle. German attacks probed the perimeter daily, seeking weak points. Artillery and mortar fire fell constantly on the town. Casualties accumulated, and medical supplies ran low. Food was rationed, ammunition was conserved. The psychological pressure of encirclement tested the defenders' morale, yet the paratroopers held, confident in their training and their commanders, and believing that relief was coming. The famous episode of German surrender demands and McAuliffe's one-word response, "Nuts," occurred on December 22nd, the same day Patton's attack began. German commanders, recognizing Bastogne's importance and concerned about the American garrison's continued resistance, sent a surrender ultimatum. McAuliffe's defiant response became legendary, embodying the defenders' determination to hold until relieved. The response also reflected confidence that relief was possible. The defenders could hear the sounds of artillery fire to the south, indicating that American forces were fighting their way toward the town. The medical situation in Bastogne grew increasingly desperate as the siege continued. The aid stations were overwhelmed with casualties. Surgical supplies ran low. Blood for transfusions was scarce. The wounded lay in improvised facilities, churches, cellars, any building that offered some protection from artillery fire. Medical personnel worked with minimal sleep, performing surgeries and treating wounds under conditions that would have been unacceptable in peacetime. The dedication of medics, nurses, and doctors saved lives and maintained the garrison's fighting capability despite mounting casualties. Captain Jack Pryor, a battalion surgeon with the 101st Airborne, described the medical challenge in letters written after the battle. His aid station treated hundreds of wounded in the first days of the siege. Supplies that should have lasted weeks were consumed in days. Pryor and his staff improvised, sterilizing and reusing bandages, stretching supplies, making impossible choices about which wounded received priority treatment. The experience, he wrote, tested not just medical skills, but moral courage, deciding who lived and who died when resources were inadequate for all. Eisenhower followed the operation's progress with intense interest and growing appreciation for Patton's achievement. Daily briefings updated him on Third Army's advance, German resistance and casualties. The difficulty of the fighting made clear that Patton's confident prediction had not underestimated the challenges, but rather reflected extraordinary capability to overcome them. Eisenhower began to realize that Patton had accomplished something genuinely remarkable, not through luck or German weakness, but through superior planning, leadership, and execution. The relationship between Patton and his corps commander, Major General John Milliken, illustrated the pressures of the operation. Milliken was competent but cautious, preferring methodical advances with secure flanks. Patton was aggressive and willing to accept risk in pursuit of objectives. This difference in temperament created tension. Patton constantly pushed Milliken to advance faster, to take risks, to maintain momentum. Milliken resisted what he saw as reckless demands that would result in unnecessary casualties. The tension between them reflected broader debates about how to balance speed against security in military operations. Patton's diary entries during the Bastogne operation revealed his frustration with what he perceived as insufficient aggressiveness from subordinates. December 23rd. Milliken moving too slowly. Must push harder tomorrow. December 24th. Progress still too slow. The men in Bastogne are counting on us. We cannot fail them. December 25th. Christmas Day and still not there. Unacceptable. Ordered Gaffey to break through regardless of cost. These entries showed Patton's single-minded focus on achieving the objective and his impatience with commanders who he felt were not sharing his urgency. The critical breakthrough came on December 26th. Combat Command R of the 4th Armored Division, led by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, broke through German defensive positions near Eisenhower, just 4 miles from Bastogne. Abrams organized a flying column, tanks, armored infantry, and artillery, and launched a direct assault down the road to Bastogne. The column smashed through German positions, accepting casualties but maintaining momentum. By late afternoon, the first American tanks reached the 101st Airborne's perimeter, breaking the siege. The moment when Abrams' lead tanks made contact with the 101st Airborne became one of the war's iconic scenes. Paratroopers who had endured a week of siege, who had fought off daily attacks, who had survived on minimal rations and watched casualties mount without adequate medical care. These soldiers greeted the relieving forces with exhausted joy. The tank crews, who had fought for 4 days through German defenses, losing comrades and vehicles but never stopping, these soldiers felt vindication that their sacrifices had accomplished the mission. The meeting represented triumph over seemingly impossible odds. Lieutenant Charles Boggess, whose tanks were first to reach the 101st Airborne's lines, described the meeting decades later with emotion. His relief column had fought through the last German positions, taking fire from all sides. When they broke through and saw American soldiers ahead, the relief was overwhelming. Paratroopers climbed on his tank, shaking hands and embracing the tankers. Everyone was exhausted, filthy, and elated. Boggess remembered thinking that this was why they had endured the previous day's hell, to reach these men who had held when surrounded, and to give them hope that they were not alone. The tactical situation remained dangerous, even after the initial relief. The corridor Abrams had opened was narrow and vulnerable to German counterattack. Supply convoys using the road came under fire. German forces still surrounded Bastogne on 3 sides and continued attacking the perimeter. The 4th Armored Division had to expand the corridor and eliminate German positions threatening it. Additional divisions had to be brought up to strengthen the Bastogne sector and prepare for further offensive operations. The relief was not the end of the battle, but the beginning of a new phase. Patton's reaction to the relief's success was characteristically confident. He had promised to reach Bastogne quickly, and he had delivered. The achievement vindicated his aggressive operational style and his insistence that rapid action could accomplish what methodical approaches could not. Yet he also recognized the cost. The Third Army had suffered over 1,400 casualties in the 4 days of fighting, and the 4th Armored Division had lost significant numbers of tanks and men. Patton believed the cost was justified by the results, but he understood that others might question whether slower, more methodical approaches might have achieved the same objectives at lower cost. Eisenhower's response to Patton's achievement was complex. He recognized and acknowledged the operational brilliance involved in planning and executing such a rapid movement and attack. The relief of Bastogne had prevented the Germans from exploiting their penetration and had begun the process of eliminating the bulge. Patton had accomplished what Eisenhower had doubted was possible, and that accomplishment deserved recognition. Yet Eisenhower also saw the casualties and understood that Patton's aggressive style, while effective, came at significant human cost. The shock that Eisenhower reportedly felt upon learning that Patton had actually reached Bastogne when promised reflected his initial skepticism about the operation's feasibility. Eisenhower had heard Patton make confident predictions before, some of which had proven overly optimistic. The Bastogne operation's success demonstrated that Patton's confidence had been based on genuine capability rather than mere bravado. This realization enhanced Eisenhower's respect for Patton's operational skills while simultaneously reinforcing his concerns about managing such an aggressive subordinate. The public relations dimension of Bastogne's relief created its own complications. The press celebrated the 101st Airborne's heroic defense and the dramatic relief operation. Patton and the Third Army received substantial attention and praise. This publicity pleased Patton, who craved recognition, but it also created jealousies among other commanders who felt their contributions were being overlooked. Eisenhower had to manage these tensions while maintaining focus on the broader strategic situation. The strategic significance of Bastogne's relief extended beyond the tactical achievement. By holding Bastogne and then relieving it quickly, American forces had denied the Germans use of the critical road junction and had prevented the exploitation of their initial penetration. The German offensive, which had achieved surprise and initial success, was now stalled. German forces in the Bulge were vulnerable to counterattack. The initiative had shifted to the Americans. Hitler's last great gamble in the West had failed, and Germany's strategic situation had worsened rather than improved. The weather finally began to clear on December 23rd, allowing Allied aircraft to attack German positions and supply lines for the first time since the offensive began. The impact was immediate and devastating. German columns moving in daylight were strafed and bombed. Supply trucks were destroyed. Artillery positions were targeted. The Luftwaffe, attempting to provide air cover, was overwhelmed by superior Allied numbers. The clearing weather tilted the balance decisively in the Allies' favor and accelerated the German offensive's failure. The success of the Bastogne relief operation rested on multiple factors that combined to produce the remarkable result. Patton's leadership and aggressive operational philosophy created the mindset necessary to attempt such a rapid movement and attack. Third Army's staff work and planning capability translated that mindset into executable plans. The divisions executing the operation possessed the training, experience, and morale necessary to overcome the challenges they faced. The logistics organization performed brilliantly in moving and sustaining forces under difficult conditions. Each element was necessary. None alone would have been sufficient. The planning process that enabled the rapid movement deserves particular attention. Patton's foresight in ordering contingency planning before the Verdun conference meant that when Eisenhower asked for options, detailed plans already existed. Colonel Halley Maddox and his operations staff had worked out 3 scenarios with varying numbers of divisions and different timelines. They had coordinated with division commanders who had prepared their own plans. They had identified logistics challenges and developed solutions. This preparation meant that when Patton committed to attacking on December 22nd, the machinery was already in motion. The movement itself demonstrated organizational competence at multiple levels. Division staffs coordinated the disengagement from ongoing operations and the movement to new assembly areas. Regiment and battalion commanders moved their units at night over unfamiliar roads in terrible weather. Supply officers ensured that units had fuel, ammunition, and food. Engineers kept roads passable. Military police controlled traffic. Medical units repositioned to support the coming attack. The coordination required was extraordinary, yet it happened smoothly enough that the attack launched on schedule. The role of junior officers and non-commissioned officers in the operation's success cannot be overstated. These leaders, lieutenants, captains, sergeants, made countless tactical decisions that kept the operation moving. They led their units through difficult terrain under fire. They maintained discipline and morale when soldiers were exhausted and casualties were mounting. They solved problems on the spot without waiting for orders from higher headquarters. This leadership at the tactical level was essential to translating operational plans into battlefield success. Sergeant Donald Burgett, a squad leader in the 101st Airborne, exemplified the junior leadership that made the defense of Bastogne possible. When his platoon leader was wounded, Burgett took command and led the defense of a critical sector of the perimeter. He organized fighting positions, directed fire, called for artillery support, and kept his soldiers fighting despite being outnumbered and under constant attack. His actions were typical of the hundreds of junior leaders whose competence and courage made victory possible. The attack's execution revealed both the strengths and limitations of American tactical doctrine in 1944. American forces relied heavily on firepower, artillery, tanks, and air power when available, to suppress enemy defenses and enable infantry advances. This approach was effective but required substantial ammunition expenditure and resulted in slow, methodical advances. When German positions were well prepared and defended by determined troops, American advantages in firepower were partially offset by defensive advantages in terrain and fortification. Progress was achieved, but at significant cost in time and casualties. The leadership at division and battalion level proved crucial to maintaining momentum despite difficulties. Commanders like Hugh Gaffey of the 4th Armored Division understood Patton's intent and drove their units to achieve it. Battalion commanders like Crichton Abrams led from the front, inspiring their soldiers and making tactical decisions that kept attacks moving. Company commanders and platoon leaders made the tactical adjustments necessary to overcome local resistance. This leadership at multiple echelons enabled the operation to succeed despite the challenges. The German defensive response to Third Army's attack revealed both capability and limitations. German units fought skillfully, using terrain and prepared positions to maximize defensive advantages. Anti-tank guns, positioned to cover approaches, destroyed American armor. Infantry in foxholes and fortified buildings contested advances. Artillery fire disrupted American assembly areas and routes of advance. Yet German forces lacked the strength to do more than delay the American advance. They could not launch effective counterattacks to seal the penetrations. They could not prevent American forces from grinding forward despite casualties. The relief of Bastogne did not end the Battle of the Bulge, but marked a turning point. German forces remained dangerous and continued attacking, particularly in the northern sector, where First Army faced the 6th SS Panzer Army. But the southern shoulder of the German penetration had been stabilized. Bastogne remained in American hands. The initiative was shifting to the Americans. Over the following weeks, Allied forces would compress and eventually eliminate the Bulge, inflicting catastrophic losses on German forces and destroying Germany's last mobile reserves. The logistical achievement that supported Third Army's operations during the Battle of the Bulge extended beyond the initial relief of Bastogne. The Army's supply organization had to maintain support for divisions engaged in continuous combat in winter conditions. Fuel consumption was enormous. Vehicles needed more fuel in cold weather, and the distances traveled during the advance and subsequent operations were substantial. Ammunition expenditure was high, particularly for artillery. Food, medical supplies, and replacement equipment all had to flow forward continuously. Colonel Walter Muller, Third Army's chief supply officer, described the logistics challenge as the most difficult of the war. His organization had to reorient supply lines, establish new depots, and maintain distribution to divisions engaged in mobile operations. Trucks operated around the clock, despite weather that made driving dangerous. Supply personnel worked in exposed conditions, often under fire. Muller credited the logistics success to the dedication of thousands of soldiers, whose unglamorous work made combat operations possible. The relationship between Eisenhower and Patton was affected by the Bastogne operation in subtle but important ways. Eisenhower gained renewed appreciation for Patton's operational capabilities and his value as an aggressive commander. The achievement vindicated Eisenhower's decision to retain Patton in command, despite the Sicily slapping incidents and other controversies. Yet the operation also reinforced Eisenhower's concerns about Patton's reliability and the need for close supervision. Patton had delivered what he promised, but Eisenhower knew from experience that Patton was capable of actions that could create problems as easily as he solved them. Patton's own assessment of the operation reflected pride in his army's achievement and satisfaction at proving skeptics wrong. He believed the operation demonstrated that aggressive action properly planned and executed could accomplish what conventional wisdom deemed impossible. He saw vindication for his operational philosophy and his insistence on maintaining offensive momentum. Yet he also recognized, though he rarely admitted publicly, that the operation's success had required favorable circumstances, competent subordinates, experienced troops, and German weaknesses, as well as his own planning and leadership. The soldiers who executed the operation had their own perspectives shaped by their experiences. For the paratroopers in Bastogne, the relief meant survival and validation that their resistance had been worthwhile. For the soldiers of the 4th Armored Division and other units that fought to reach them, the operation meant accomplishment of a difficult mission, despite heavy costs. Both groups developed mutual respect. The defenders admired the relievers' determination and sacrifice, while the relievers admired the defenders' courage and endurance under siege. The psychological dimension of the relief operation's success deserves examination. The soldiers advancing toward Bastogne knew they were fighting to rescue surrounded comrades. This knowledge provided motivation beyond normal military objectives. The urgency communicated by Patton and other commanders filtered down to the tactical level, where soldiers understood that every hour of delay meant more suffering for the Bastogne garrison. This sense of mission and urgency helped soldiers endure hardships and continue fighting despite casualties and exhaustion. The casualties suffered during the relief operation, over 1,400 in 4 days, represented a significant cost for the tactical result achieved. Modern analysis might question whether slower, more methodical approaches could have achieved the same result at lower cost. Yet the defenders in Bastogne could not have held indefinitely. Every day of delay increased the risk that German attacks would break through the perimeter or that supplies would run out. The rapid relief, despite its costs, prevented the fall of Bastogne and the potential catastrophic consequences that would have followed. The logistics achievement that supported the operation deserves recognition alongside the operational and tactical accomplishments. Third Army's supply organization had to reorient from supporting offensive operations in the Saar to supporting a movement north and then an attack in a different direction. Ammunition, fuel, and supplies had to be moved to new locations. Supply routes had to be established through congested areas. Distribution had to continue even as combat operations were ongoing. The fact that Third Army's units never ran out of critical supplies during the operation testified to the logistics organization's competence. The role of artillery in supporting the relief operation illustrated American advantages in firepower. Third Army massed artillery to support each division's attack, delivering devastating concentrations on German positions. Forward observers with advancing units called for fire on targets as they appeared. Counter-battery fire suppressed German artillery. The sheer volume of American artillery fire, made possible by superior logistics and ammunition supply, compensated for some tactical disadvantages and enabled advances that might otherwise have stalled. The absence of air support for much of the operation, due to weather, forced American forces to rely more heavily on ground capabilities. When skies finally cleared on December 23rd, allowing Allied aircraft to attack German positions and supply lines, the pressure on German forces intensified. But the operation's initial phases had proceeded without significant air support, demonstrating that properly planned and executed ground operations could succeed even without the air superiority that Americans typically enjoyed. The winter conditions that made the operation so difficult also created opportunities. The frozen ground allowed vehicles to move cross-country in areas that would have been impassable in other seasons. Rivers and streams were easier to cross. The cold weather reduced disease and improved food preservation, while the overall impact of winter conditions was negative, creating hardships for soldiers and limiting operational possibilities. These secondary benefits partially offset the challenges. The Bastogne relief operation, while celebrated as a significant achievement, also generated criticism and questions that merit examination. Some military analysts argued that the operation, though successful, had been more costly than necessary. They contended that a more methodical approach, with more thorough preparation and coordination, might have achieved the same result with fewer casualties. This criticism reflected broader debates about Patton's command style and whether his aggressive approach, while effective, unnecessarily risked soldiers' lives. The counterfactual question of what would have happened had Patton not been available to conduct the relief operation invites speculation. Would another commander have attempted such a rapid movement and attack? Would a more cautious approach have allowed German forces to capture Bastogne and exploit the breakthrough? These questions cannot be definitively answered, but they highlight the extent to which the operation's success depended on Patton's particular combination of confidence, aggressiveness, and operational skill. The relationship between Three Corps Commander John Milliken and Patton during the operation revealed tensions inherent in Patton's command style. Milliken, a competent but more cautious commander, found himself constantly pushed by Patton to move faster and take more risks. After the battle, Patton relieved Milliken of command, believing he had been insufficiently aggressive. This relief raised questions about whether Patton's demands had been reasonable or whether he had expected more than was tactically prudent. Different analysts reached different conclusions based on their broader views about appropriate levels of operational risk. Major General John Milliken's perspective on the relief operation, expressed years later, revealed his frustration with Patton's command approach. Milliken believed he had conducted the operation as effectively as circumstances allowed. He argued that Patton's constant pressure to advance faster had not been accompanied by additional resources or support that would have made faster advance possible. Milliken felt that Patton judged commanders on results without fully appreciating the tactical challenges they faced. This perspective illustrated the tensions between operational commanders focused on rapid results and tactical commanders concerned with preserving their unit's combat power. The publicity surrounding the Bastogne operation and Patton's role in it created resentment among other commanders and units who felt their contributions were being minimized. The 101st Airborne had held Bastogne against overwhelming odds, yet much of the press attention focused on Patton and the relief force. First Army units fighting in the northern sector of the Bulge faced equally difficult challenges, but received less recognition. These jealousies, while perhaps inevitable, complicated relationships among Allied commanders and units. The question of whether Eisenhower should have anticipated the German offensive and taken preventive measures generated controversy then and since. Intelligence warnings had been dismissed. Defensive positions in the Ardennes had been thinly held. Reserve forces had not been positioned to respond quickly to a breakthrough. Some critics argued that Eisenhower's focus on offensive operations had left Allied forces vulnerable to the German attack. Others contended that the surprise was unavoidable, given intelligence limitations, and that Eisenhower's response once the attack began was excellent. The role of air power in the Battle of the Bulge, and particularly in the Bastogne sector, raised questions about air-ground coordination. Weather prevented air operations during the critical early days of the battle, when air attacks on German columns might have disrupted the offensive. When weather cleared, Allied aircraft attacked German forces effectively, but by then, the crisis had passed. This highlighted the limitations of depending on air power in European winter weather and the necessity of ground forces being capable of operating without air support. The treatment of German prisoners and civilians during Third Army's advance generated some controversies. In the heat of combat, some American soldiers committed acts against the laws of war, shooting prisoners, looting, and harsh treatment of civilians. While these incidents were relatively rare and were not sanctioned by policy, they reflected the intensity of combat and the anger soldiers felt at German atrocities discovered elsewhere. Patton's attitude toward such incidents was ambivalent. He officially condemned violations of the laws of war, but privately seemed to condone harsh treatment of Germans. The strategic debate about whether the Bulge represented an opportunity or a crisis divided Allied commanders. Eisenhower famously characterized it as an opportunity to destroy German forces in the open rather than behind fortifications. Patton agreed, seeing the German offensive as a chance to inflict decisive losses. Others, particularly British commanders, saw it as a dangerous crisis that threatened Allied plans and required defensive measures to contain. This disagreement reflected different strategic philosophies and national perspectives. The long-term impact of the Battle of the Bulge on the war's timeline remains debated. The German offensive delayed Allied plans for crossing the Rhine and advancing into Germany. Resources that might have been used for offensive operations had to be diverted to eliminating the Bulge. Yet the battle also destroyed German reserves that might otherwise have defended against Allied advances. The net effect on the war's duration is unclear. Some analysts argue the delay extended the war, while others contend that the destruction of German forces ultimately shortened it. The psychological impact of the Bulge on German and Allied forces proved significant. For the Germans, the initial success and then ultimate failure represented a pattern that would repeat in subsequent operations. Brief tactical success followed by strategic defeat. For the Americans, the shock of the surprise attack gave way to confidence that they could respond effectively to unexpected challenges. The experience hardened American forces and vindicated American operational methods. The personal relationship between Eisenhower and Patton continued to be complicated after Bastogne. Eisenhower publicly praised Patton's achievement and privately acknowledged its significance. Yet he also continued to worry about Patton's indiscipline and capacity for controversy. In the months following Bastogne, Eisenhower would have to deal with additional Patton controversies, including inappropriate statements about the Soviet Union and post-war politics. The Patton established earlier in the war, Patton proving his value on the battlefield, while simultaneously creating problems through his behavior, continued until war's end. The legacy of the Bastogne operation in military education and doctrine has been substantial. The operation is studied in military schools as an example of rapid movement and aggressive offensive action. Patton's ability to move an army corps quickly and attack effectively is analyzed for lessons about operational planning and execution. The operation's success reinforced American emphasis on mobility, firepower, and aggressive action in military doctrine. Yet critics note that the operation's specific circumstances, the crisis that made speed essential, the particular capabilities of Third Army, and Patton's unique leadership may limit its applicability to other situations. The question of casualties and whether they were justified by the results achieved continues to generate debate. The Third Army suffered over 1,400 casualties in 4 days of fighting to reach Bastogne. Additional casualties were suffered in the subsequent fighting to expand and secure the corridor. These losses, while significant, were far lower than the potential losses if Bastogne had fallen and the German offensive had succeeded. Yet the individual soldiers who died or were wounded paid the ultimate price for the operation's success, raising eternal questions about the human cost of military victory. The relief of Bastogne stands as one of World War II's most dramatic military operations, a testament to what determined soldiers and inspired leadership can accomplish under desperate circumstances. In 4 days of brutal winter fighting, George S. Patton's Third Army achieved what many considered impossible, moving over 100,000 men and breaking through German defenses to rescue the surrounded garrison. The operation demonstrated operational excellence, aggressive leadership, and the capacity of American forces to respond effectively to crisis. For Dwight D. Eisenhower, the operation provided a lesson in the value of aggressive commanders willing to attempt difficult missions. His initial skepticism about Patton's confident prediction had given way to shocked admiration when Patton delivered what he had promised. The relief of Bastogne vindicated Eisenhower's decision to retain Patton in command, despite the controversies that had marked his career. Yet it also reinforced the challenges of managing such a volatile subordinate, a brilliant commander whose value was matched by the supervision he required. The relationship between Eisenhower and Patton, tested and complicated by the Bastogne operation, reflected broader challenges of military command. Eisenhower understood grand strategy and coalition warfare, but needed aggressive operational commanders to execute his strategic vision. Patton understood operational warfare and possessed the personality to drive forces to achieve difficult objectives, but he needed strategic direction and restraint. Their partnership, despite its tensions, was effective because each provided what the other lacked. For the soldiers who fought in the operation, the paratroopers who held Bastogne's perimeter, the tankers who smashed through German defenses, the infantrymen who advanced in freezing weather, the experience was one of hardship, courage, and ultimate triumph. They had accomplished a mission that would become legendary in military history. They had demonstrated capabilities that commanded respect from friend and foe alike. They had paid a significant price in casualties and suffering, but they had achieved an objective that helped determine the war's outcome. The legacy of Bastogne extends beyond the specific events of December 1944 to broader lessons about warfare, leadership, and the human capacity to overcome adversity. The operation demonstrated that well-trained, well-led forces can accomplish extraordinary objectives when necessity demands. It showed that aggressive operational concepts, properly executed, can achieve results that methodical approaches cannot. It proved that speed and determination can overcome material disadvantages and difficult circumstances. Yet the Bastogne operation also carries cautionary lessons. The casualties suffered during the relief, over 1,400 in 4 days, remind us that aggressive operations exact costs that must be weighed against objectives achieved. The operation's success depended on multiple favorable factors: capable subordinate commanders, experienced troops, adequate logistic support, and German weaknesses that might not exist in other circumstances. The operation succeeded, but success was not inevitable, and failure would have been catastrophic. The shock that Eisenhower experienced when Patton actually reached Bastogne as promised reflects the operation's audacity and the widespread skepticism about its feasibility. Military professionals understood the challenges involved in moving an army corps 90 degrees across difficult terrain in winter and attacking prepared defenses on a tight timeline. That Patton accomplished this testified to his operational brilliance and his army's capabilities. That Eisenhower had doubted it was possible reflected reasonable assessment of the difficulties involved. The human dimension of the Bastogne operation, the soldiers who fought, suffered, died, and ultimately prevailed, remains its most significant aspect. These young men, most barely into adulthood, displayed courage and endurance under conditions that tested human limits. They fought in freezing weather with inadequate supplies. They watched comrades killed and wounded. They pushed forward despite exhaustion and fear. Their achievement was made possible by training, leadership, and logistics, but ultimately it rested on their willingness to endure hardship and risk death for comrades and mission. The strategic significance of Bastogne's relief extended far beyond the tactical achievement. By preventing German forces from capturing the vital road junction and exploiting their penetration, the operation helped contain the bulge and preserve the conditions necessary for Allied counterattacks. The German offensive, Hitler's last great gamble in the West, had failed. German reserves had been expended without achieving strategic objectives. The path was open for Allied forces to advance into Germany and end the war. In the context of Eisenhower and Patton's relationship, Bastogne represented both vindication and complication. Eisenhower's recognition of Patton's achievement strengthened the operational commander's position and reinforced his value to Allied operations. Yet the operation also demonstrated the kind of aggressive, risk-taking approach that made Eisenhower nervous. Managing Patton required balancing appreciation for his capabilities against concerns about his judgment and behavior. The Bastogne operation shifted that balance toward appreciation without eliminating the concerns. The soldiers who participated in the Bastogne operation carried their experiences for the rest of their lives. For some, it was their finest moment, a time when they had been tested and had not been found wanting. For others, it was a traumatic experience whose memories troubled them for decades. For most, it was both, a source of pride mixed with painful memories of hardship and loss. Their willingness to speak about their experiences, to share their stories with historians and family members, has preserved the operation's memory and ensured that future generations understand what was accomplished and at what cost. The relief of Bastogne, achieved in 4 days of brutal fighting when many thought it would take a week or more, stands as testimony to what determined soldiers and inspired leadership can accomplish. It represents a moment when audacity, skill, and courage combined to produce a result that changed a battle's outcome and influenced a war's trajectory. It demonstrates that sometimes the impossible requires only the right combination of vision, capability, and will to become reality. And it reminds us that leadership matters, that the right commander at the right moment can make the difference between defeat and victory, between disaster and triumph. As decades have passed and the last veterans of Bastogne have died, the operation's legacy endures in military doctrine, historical memory, and cultural consciousness. The story has been told in books, films, and documentaries. The lessons have been studied in military schools around the world. The achievements have been commemorated in monuments and museums. Yet, beyond these formal remembrances, Bastogne endures as a symbol of American military capability, of the citizen soldiers who rose to extraordinary challenges, and of the leadership that made victory possible. The relationship between strategic vision and operational execution, exemplified by Eisenhower and Patton's partnership during the Bastogne crisis, offers enduring lessons. Strategic commanders must provide clear guidance and direction, while allowing operational commanders the freedom to execute missions according to their judgment. Operational commanders must understand strategic objectives while focusing on the practical challenges of achieving them. When this relationship functions well, as it did during the Bastogne operation, the results can be extraordinary. The shock that Eisenhower felt when Patton reached Bastogne as promised was not merely surprise at a tactical achievement. It was recognition that American forces had reached a level of operational competence that could accomplish missions deemed nearly impossible. It was appreciation for a subordinate commander whose brilliance was vindicated despite his flaws. It was relief that the crisis had been resolved through decisive action rather than prolonged struggle. And it was, perhaps, a moment of self-recognition that his own skepticism had underestimated what American forces were capable of achieving when led by commanders willing to accept risk in pursuit of decisive results. The relief of Bastogne remains one of World War II's defining moments, a time when necessity demanded the impossible and leadership delivered it. The operation succeeded because multiple elements came together: Patton's vision and aggressiveness, Third Army's planning and execution capabilities, the soldiers' courage and endurance, and the favorable circumstances that made success possible. Remove any of these elements, and the operation might have failed with catastrophic consequences. In the end, Bastogne stands as a reminder that warfare is ultimately about human beings, their courage, their suffering, their capacity for extraordinary achievement under pressure. The statistics of divisions moved, miles advanced, and casualties suffered tell only part of the story. The full story includes the paratroopers holding their perimeter, the tankers fighting through German defenses, the supply soldiers keeping ammunition and fuel flowing, the medics treating the wounded, and the commanders making decisions that determined whether their soldiers lived or died. These human dimensions give meaning to the operational achievements and ensure that Bastogne's legacy transcends military history to touch fundamental questions about human capability and resilience under extreme conditions.